to the Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson, along with our house DJ Tolliver. And Tolliver, I am very excited about this show, but as you know, I have something else on my mind right now. I'm about to embark on the biggest physical feat of my life in just a matter of days.
What's that? Oh, you're going on the bike ride.
I'm doing the bike ride. I'm doing the final AIDS life cycle ride from San Francisco to LA. It is 7 days, 560 miles to raise money for HIV prevention and care for people with the disease. It's been amazing to train for it over the last several months. Meet people who've done it for years. You can find out more about it at listentothemiddle.com. And when we are not live next week and instead on tape, just back off and know that I'm exhausted and I am living on electrolyte packets.
Not back off.
Okay. So this hour we are talking about a college education and whether it is still worth the cost, which is now about $30,000 a year for a public school, about $60,000 for a private school. Now, college graduates do make about 60% more money on average than high school graduates, but often have a lot of debt to pay off, and a job is certainly not guaranteed depending on your major. So we want to hear from you. Is a college education worth the cost? Our number is 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. We'll get to that in just a moment. But first, last week on the show, we asked you about diversity, equity, and inclusion, which the Trump administration has basically banned from the federal government. Here are some of the voicemails we got after the show.
My name is Lee Williams. I'm calling from St. Louis. If not DEI, then we're back to segregation like it was 50 to 60 years ago. If not DEI, then every hire that's called a merit hire means a white male.
My name is Mesa. I am from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And in my opinion, DEI is unreplaceable. There is no DEI or what equation in society today.
I'm Jason. I'm in Kansas. I actually generally support a lot of DEI practices, but what I don't support is essentially giving favor to people that aren't white. It's honestly just not fair in my opinion, and especially some of my friends don't like the idea that, okay, I'm a black doctor, but I want to make sure that I don't have that little asterisk that I got in because of my color over somebody who is more deserving.
Well, thanks to everyone who called in, and you can hear that entire episode on our podcast in partnership with iHeart Podcasts on the iHeart app or wherever you listen to podcasts. So now to our question this hour. Is a college education still worth the cost? Tolliver, the phone number, please.
It's 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. You can also write into us at listentothemiddle.com. You can also comment on our live stream, our YouTube, our TikTok, our Instagram. I'm looking at them all, so please hit us. Yeah.
Joining me this hour, former University of California President Janet Napolitano, who also served as Secretary of Homeland Security under President Obama and the Governor of Arizona, and now directs the Center for Security and Politics at UC Berkeley. Secretary Napolitano, great to have you on the show.
Thank you.
And Education Learning Lab founder Kathleen deLaski is with us as well. She's the author of the book, Who Needs College Anymore? Kathleen, welcome to you.
Thank you for having me.
So before we get to the phones, Janet Napolitano, as we have this conversation about college, President Trump is targeting the oldest university in America. That would be Harvard, taking away government funding, billions of dollars, trying to revoke visas for international students, remove the tax-exempt status. As the former president of the University of California, what is your message to Harvard or to President Trump right now?
Well, my message to Harvard is keep reforming yourself and stand strong. And my message to the Trump administration is, what kind of future do you envision for the United States without the vital higher education sector that we have? And it's not just Harvard. I mean, the Ivy League is a teeny tiny percentage of higher education in the United States. It gets the bulk of public comment, but it is so tiny. Higher education in the United States is a combination of private universities, liberal arts universities, grand public universities, state universities like the University of California. There are so-called research universities. There are so-called comprehensive universities. Mm-hmm. There are two-year community colleges. There are numerous kind of trade types of education beyond high school. I think the question, in a way, for today should be not only is a college education worth it, but how we measure worth, and also is an education beyond high school really necessary for the world in which these young people are going to enter?
And do you think it is?
Oh, for sure. I mean, you know, look, college education, there are lots of different tracks you can take. There's a big menu, but it really should be viewed as a time of maturation, a time of preparation, a time of exploration. And it hits for most people right at that age where, they're just about to be independent of their families. But they need to grow, they need to expand, and they need to prepare. And frankly, K-12 education in this era is not enough.
Kathleen deLaski, one of the things President Trump has proposed is to take the billions in federal grants from Harvard and distribute them to trade schools around the country. As someone who has written about the alternatives to four-year colleges, what do you think of that?
Well, I do think that trade school has gotten a bad rap over the years, and we're now at a point when college has become so expensive for many families, or at least the perception that it's expensive. And often there are many affordable college options, but because the perception is that it's very expensive, people are looking at, what else could I do to prepare myself specifically for careers? Because, most people today are saying that they go to college to prepare for careers. It used to be that they would say they went to college to, for the adultification process that Janet is describing. But now they want results, they want jobs, and they're seeing that, a lot of the degrees that people can come out with are not producing jobs. So you're seeing a lot of press right now about, but let's all become welders and we need more electricians and HVAC people. But part of why I wrote the book is that it's all, the work world and the work landscape is changing so much because of technology that we don't really need to think of this binary choice between trade school or college or nothing, right? Technology is blurring the lines between all these kinds of jobs, and high schools are starting to show us some of the options of how you can learn both. You can learn cloud computing while you're in high school. You can do an apprenticeship either instead of or during college, and you can get industry certifications that that kind of line you up to be job ready, whether you go to college or not. But I'm not telling people not to go to college. I'm just saying the world is changing, and colleges themselves will be offering a lot more options over the coming decades, as well as there being, non-college options for people.
Secretary
I
Napolitano,
think,
go ahead.
Jeremy, I think this proposal that President Trump made, let's take money from Harvard and give it to trade schools. It's kind of a classic administration move. Let's just divide people and have them competing against each other. If he really wants to build trade schools, invest in trade schools. But don't take
You
it
don't have
away
to take it
from
from
the
Harvard
leading.
to do that, you're saying.
You don't have to take it away from Harvard to do that. So I think I'm all for education, and particularly post high school education. Let's build on it, and let's create an expectation in our young people that they are going to go beyond high school in order to really be fully prepared for the coming years.
I want to just ask you about one more thing that the president is doing, because it does get to what we're talking about here, and it has to do with the international students. There are more than 1 million international students in the U.S. at colleges and universities. They often pay full freight and bring a lot of money in for the colleges. Janet Napolitano, are they driving up costs or helping lower costs for other students?
Well, I think for several reasons, they don't drive up costs. Costs at University of California is by and large a 4-year institution, and it's R1, meaning it's heavily research based. We do have a certain percentage of international students. And one of the ways we are able to keep tuition costs down for in-state California students is because we have out-of-state students, which include out-of-state in the United States, but also international students who are paying a full tuition load. At the University of California, if you come from a family that makes less than $80,000 a year, you pay no tuition to attend the leading public university system in the country. So I would say on the kind of relative valuation, if you want to use the term valuation, these are young people from around the world. By and large, what they do is help support domestic students.
Mm-hmm. Kathleen deLaski, why has college gotten to be so expensive? For a public university, I was looking back in 1963, it was $243 a year, which was about $2,400 adjusted for inflation, but now it's almost $30,000 for the public universities.
Well, the biggest reason, I served for 8 years on the board of a public university in Virginia. For many decades, we thought of the state and to some extent the federal government as investing in higher education as at least a partial entitlement, right? And that investment has shifted. It's actually flipped. It used to be, government funded about 2/3 of public education, and now that model has flipped to about 1/3. Of course, it varies by states. California, I think, supports more than most states do, but it's, more of the cost is borne by families. You always hear about, at least in college circles, everybody says, "Oh, they're putting, climbing gyms or climbing walls and lazy rivers at colleges," and that's what's driving up the cost. Is that parents expect it to be like the Ritz, Carlton. That's just not true. I mean, it's human. It's human costs of personnel and keeping the buildings renovated and that kind of thing. That's what's driving up the cost of college, and with less public investment.
Right. They put a lazy river in when I was in college, but I never actually got into it.
Oh, really?
So
Wow.
I didn't get to benefit from that. Tolliver,
I thought that was an urban myth. Yeah.
No, it's real. One of the most famous college commencement addresses ever, Tolliver, was given by Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, back in 2005 at Stanford.
Yeah, he talked about going to Reed College, which he said was almost as expensive as Stanford.
After 6 months, I couldn't see the value in it. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, and no idea how college was going to help me figure it out. And here I was, spending all of the money my parents had saved their entire life. So I decided to drop out and trust that it would all work out okay. It was pretty scary at the time, but looking back, it was one of the best decisions I ever made. The minute I dropped out, I could stop taking the required classes that didn't interest me and begin dropping in on the ones that looked far more interesting.
He said one of those classes was a calligraphy class that actually influenced the typefaces used on the early Mac computers. Tolliver, what are we listening to here?
This is Vampire Weekend with Campus. So their lead singer was born in the Upper West Side. He went to Montessori school. He majored in English. So my guess is that he's never heard of the word FAFSA. Okay, so more of your calls coming up on The Middle.
This is The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson. If you're just tuning in, The Middle is a national call-in show. We're focused on elevating voices from the middle, geographically, politically, philosophically, or maybe you just want to meet in the middle. This hour, we're asking if a college education is still worth the cost. Tolliver, what is the number to call in?
It's 8444-MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. You can also write to us at listentothemiddle.com or on all social media platforms, por favor.
I'm joined by former University of California President Janet Napolitano and Education Learning Lab founder Kathleen deLaski, and the lines are filling up, but let me ask you one more thing before we go to the phones. Secretary Napolitano, as somebody who has run a lot of big organizations, when you hire, does the college degree matter to you?
It depends on the job. At the level at which I'm doing the hiring, and for people doing the jobs they're being hired for, yes, a college degree matters. Oftentimes a postgraduate degree matters. But there are many jobs further down in large organizations that don't require a college education. But I will tell you, more and more, they require something beyond high school.
All right, let's get to the phones. Ryan is calling from Pittsburgh. Ryan, go ahead. Do you think a college education is still worth the cost?
Hey, good evening. I work at a research university here in Pennsylvania, and I'm increasingly seeing that for probably more than half of the students, it's not. But I think that an experience at a 2-year community college would be. So I'm increasingly seeing like community colleges as maybe the new land of opportunity for post-high school education. But I think that definitely means we need to stop having this caste-like mentality and looking down at community colleges as where failed PhDs go to teach and failed students end up because it's open enrollment. We very much have to change our mindset if we're going to re-envision the role and value and potential contributions that community colleges have to play to society.
Ryan, thank you for that. Kathleen deLaski, what do you think about that? Do you believe that people look down on community colleges?
I think that historically has been the case, but I feel like the community college movement is having a moment right now. That is where a lot of the increase in enrollment is coming from right now, post-COVID. It's kind of exciting what that community colleges are is kind of seeing themselves as talent brokers that are becoming more agile in their regions. And I know my organization, Education Design Lab, works with about 100 community colleges around the country, working on what we call micro pathways. They're shorter term versions of college that result in a credential, and we've designed them with employers. So your caller is absolutely right. That is a great way to both save money and really sort of test out a career or a career switch later in life. A lot of the students who are coming to community colleges are in their 20s and 30s and 40s. And 50s. We see for these short programs, people right up to, what you would think was near retirement age. It's quite exciting.
Let's go to Colby, who's in Houston. Colby, welcome to The Middle. Go ahead with your thoughts.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think that considering the cost of college right now, that if you are going to go, that you should really have a good idea of what kind of career you want to have. And because, I went to college a while back, and I feel like a lot of the jobs I've had since then, my degree didn't really matter so much on whether or not I got hired.
What about the other things that you learned in college or the connections that you made? Were those important to your career?
I made some good connections. I met a lot of good people. I imagine that if I did not go to college, my life would have gone in a not so great direction. But also I know that college was, at the time it seemed really expensive. And now it's even more so when a lot of this information that you would really want is easily accessible.
Thank you for that, Colby. Secretary Napolitano, what do you think about that? I imagine you've come across many, many students at the University of California who came in wanting to do one thing and then left doing something completely different.
Yeah, that's fairly common because remember, you're dealing a lot with 17, 18-year-olds.
Right.
And they do come in with, firm ideas. And then in the course of their college career, they find other areas. They take classes that they never thought about that weren't offered in high school, and they get interested in something else. And so that's part of the maturation or adultization, I think is the word Kathleen used, that can happen in a good college education as you get exposed to different things and are able to follow that passion. Now, I'm not saying here that you should go to college and have no awareness of what a career would be, what a job would be, etc. Of course you should, but it doesn't mean you have to make those decisions from day one. In fact, I would advise against it.
Kathleen deLaski, by the way, one of the things that the Trump administration has talked about in terms of like where money is going to colleges and where they don't want it to go is they'll bring up things like LGBTQ studies or, French literature as things that are just useless in today's economy. What do you think about that?
Well, I won't comment on what President Trump is doing in that regard, except to say that there is a movement, and it's also going on in the states and was going on before President Trump came into office, whereby states are saying we want to pay for performance. In other words, we want to fund programs and degrees that result in an increase in your earnings when you come out. States like Texas have passed laws that other states are looking at. And so what you're seeing happen in some of those states is the degrees, gender studies or psychology or things which don't immediately lead to earnings increase are being, and I've seen in a few cases, those programs are being sunsetted. And that could become a trend. I don't know what Janet thinks about that, but that's something that we're all watching.
Well,
What do you think about that?
Too is part of it is some states have a very narrow view of what constitutes a higher education curricula. But on the other hand, for some of the majors you mentioned, demand in part is coming into play here, and in fact, the humanities subjects and to some degree the social science subjects in higher ed are seeing students go elsewhere for their majors, and so therefore over time they cut back those departments. So it's a combination of things. Now, in the future, it may grow back again. You don't know, but it is a function in some states of a state policy, state law, what can be taught, how it should be taught, which I think is anathema to higher education. But it's also a function over time of student demand.
Let's go to Matthew, who is in Floresville, Texas. Hi, Matthew. Do you think a college education is worth the cost?
It's worth the experience. And thank you for having me on. It's worth the experience for sure. Is it worth the cost? No, I don't think so. And I think a lot of it has to do with my specific engineering degree that I chose. But I think a lot of it has to do with just, the way the school is structured. I think a lot of universities are probably the same way. Especially in engineering, there's a lot of math involved, a lot of science involved, and they give you a 50-minute session to learn, what you're supposed to learn for that day or that week. And I spent a lot of time in the math lab. Let's just say that,
And now, and do you have debt from your schooling?
Absolutely. Yeah. I went to school when I was 26, and I went when I was in from 2010 to 2014 is when I graduated. And it was they called it a 4-year program, but it was really about a 5.5 year. I did 19 plus credits, 20 plus credits. Most years took summer classes just to graduate in 4 years. And the debt that I left with, and I worked the whole time I was in college, and the debt that I left with was close to $60,000.
Wow. And let me just ask you just real quick, Matthew, you haven't been able to get a good paying job with that engineering degree?
No, I did. I got I wouldn't say it was a good paying job when I came out. I should have been making about 15 to 20 grand more than when I started, because like I said, I went to college when I was 26.
Right.
I graduated when I was 30. My wife there, got married. So when I got a job, it was a good job, but it wasn't paying what I thought it was going to pay. I was making more than that when I was 18.
Wow.
Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. Matthew, thank you very much for that. Kathleen deLaski, how do you respond to Matthew? What do you think of that story?
Yeah, I think it's been really, I teach currently at the college level, and I think the expectation that students have coming in is that this is my ticket, and that my college degree is going to kind of deliver me at the door of my first job, and that is not happening for so many students. I mean, engineering students are actually in the best boat because they get the internships. Employers come to the school looking for interns, and that's been the practice, at least in fields like cybersecurity or nursing or teaching, that are high demand fields. But for many fields, a lot of my students are, they can't get internships, and now everybody. I mean, since the caller went to school, he said he finished in 2014. It's become more acute now that employers expect you to come out or to come to apply for a job with at least 2 to 3 years of experience. And as a chicken and egg problem, how do you get that experience, unless you're in one of those high demand majors where, the employers are asking you to come for the summer because they're checking you out because they're trying to, build their pipeline or, find their talent early. And AI is making this worse. I don't know if we'll get to that later, but it is making that situation worse. So I think it's causing families who are hearing this from their friends and older relatives, it's causing them to pause about, pulling the trigger, at least on a more expensive degree.
Right. By the way, Janet Napolitano, what do you think it would take to start bringing the cost down, or will they ever come down, the cost of going to college? They just keep going up?
Well, as we mentioned earlier in this show, the primary cost of college is personnel. It's the faculty and staff. And then you have facilities, and some of the facilities are extraordinarily expensive. Laboratories, for example, are very expensive to own and operate. Um, and so that's the driver of the cost. I think as a nation, we need to refocus ourselves on what we had in the post-World War II era, which was the growth of public universities where the states paid the bulk of the cost of the universities out of the recognition that their states would be wealthier and healthier if they had more college educated students. The basic source of revenue for public universities is either the state or tuition. And when the state cuts down, which almost every state has, including California, then tuition goes up. There has to be a balance in there somewhere. And I think if we as a country really think, what we need as a country to be strong, and to be strong, we need to be well prepared and well educated. And that is a public investment that we make, not just in students, but in our society writ large.
Tolliver, what is coming in online?
Yeah, this is great because that sort of piggybacks on what you just said. So Tom in Detroit says, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. Andrew in Chicago says, our current administration is a clown show. The idea of giving money to trade schools when it's a known fact that for-profit trade schools have been ripping off the feds for decades. I didn't know that. And then Lisa in Kansas City says, does the fact that you're having this conversation mean that this country is sliding away from an expectation of superiority to mediocrity? There's a bunch of other comments that came in, but try to keep them under 6 paragraphs, you guys. I can get them on the air if you could.
You don't have to use ChatGPT to write the comments. Okay. Let's go get a call in. Kurt in Chicago. Kurt, do you think college education is worth the cost?
Yeah, thank you for taking my call. I guess I would say if the sole evaluative criterion for determining whether or not a college education is worth it or worth the money is how much money you're going to make throughout the course of your career, you're probably completely missing the point. College is not just about making a living, it's about making a life. A liberal education is about moral formation, ethical reasoning, citizenship, the ability to live as a productive, responsible, thoughtful member of the Commonwealth. Americans should think more about making college affordable and accessible than they should about making it worthless.
Interesting point. Kurt, thank you for that. And Janet Napolitano, I know you have to leave in a couple of minutes, but what are your thoughts on what Kurt had to say? There's so much more to college than just the classes that get you the degree that maybe get you the job later.
I agree with Kurt. And, I don't want to sound too Pollyanna, but look, there's a lot that happens in those years when you're getting education beyond high school. And as I've said before, it's education, it's preparation, it's maturation. All of that is occurring. And again, the United States has been known, it's one of the things we're known for throughout the world is our higher education system. And it is an incredibly diverse menu of different types of institutions. And so students have a lot to select from, but there are many, many, many excellent institutions of higher education in this country. That's why students from around the world want to come here.
I want to ask you one more question before you go, because I'm sorry we're bouncing around from topic to topic here, but it's not every day you have the former president of the University of California and Homeland Security Secretary. So let me just ask you, how worried are you about America's position as the higher education capital of the world, given all the threats coming at it right now, that we may lose that slot?
Oh, I'm deeply concerned. The U.S. Higher education, it's one of the areas where we have a trade surplus, not a trade deficit, if you want to put it in the current administration's periscope. It is a talent magnet, and we bring talented young people from around the world. Many of them end up staying. They start their own businesses. They do research and are in the labs and create and commit their energies to the creativity of this country. And this whole sort of, we don't want international students, we're just going to cancel their visas, we're going to make it as hard as possible for them to come, etc. I don't know what the long-term strategy on that is, but to me, it's not a good long-term strategy.
That is Janet Napolitano, former president of the University of California. Thank you so much for being with us this hour.
Thanks, Jeremy.
And Kathleen deLaski is staying with us as we take your calls at 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. You can reach out at listentothemiddle.com. And Tolliver, plenty of notable figures have made the point that you don't need a college education to achieve success in life.
Yeah, President Obama offered that advice to a group of manufacturing workers in Waukesha. I had an ex who lived in Waukesha, Wisconsin, back in 2014. Listen to this.
Folks can make a lot more potentially with skilled manufacturing or the trades than they might with an art history degree. Now, nothing wrong with an art history degree. I love art history. So I don't want to get a bunch of emails from everybody. I'm just saying you can make a really good living and have a great career without getting a 4-year college education as long as you get the skills and the training that you need.
See, Jeremy, I went to school for jazz and journalism. Now here I am, a DJ on the middle.
Here you are. And Obama was a graduate of both Harvard and Columbia, but did not get an art history degree. Tolliver, what are we listening to here?
This is Third Eye Blind with Graduate. Love Third Eye Blind. This song was featured in Can't Hardly Wait. It's a movie about teenagers on the precipice of college. 20 years later, they released a sequel. It's called Fannie Mae Took My Corolla. More of your calls coming up on The Middle.
This is The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson, and this hour we're asking you if a college education is still worth the cost. You can call us at 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353, or you can reach out at listentothemiddle.com. We are joined by Education Design Lab founder Kathleen deLaski, and we are taking your calls, and there are some calls on the lines right now. Let's go to Christine, who's in Chicago. Christine, what do you think? Is a college education still worth the cost?
Well, I have to say no. And my reasoning is I went to college a little untraditionally. I didn't go right out of high school. I went to a small public university in Chicago. And for all 4 years, without any loans, scholarships, or grants, my education was $42,000. That was like what I ended up paying. And so now the fact that the costs have increased so much my question is, has the improvement in the actual education increased to that extent as well? Now, I would definitely not encourage someone not to go to school, but I really wonder, why are these costs increasing so much? And why are we making it so difficult for these kids to get the education that they really should get? And it should be available to everybody.
Christine, thank you. Kathleen, what do you think?
Yeah, Christine is right. A lot of us are kind of living on the nostalgia of yesteryear in terms of like when we went to college and it was affordable. I mean, I didn't have to take loans out. I paid for myself to do my graduate degree at Harvard. And that when I think back on that, I mean, I didn't, I had loans for a little bit, but it was, maybe 5 years I was paying loans back, and that felt very doable when you're doing that cost benefit analysis. Now, when families sit around the kitchen table and are trying to figure that out, it's middle class families that are getting squeezed the most, and that's because if you're very low income, if your family makes like less than 40,000, you can qualify for the grants, the federal grants. Those are still very much available, and if your parents are pretty wealthy, then that's also okay because the student isn't usually paying, but everybody in the middle is squeezed, and so that's you see a lot of the people in middle class and even wealthier classes are the ones that are actually stepping back from going to college because they're doing the cost benefit analysis of do they want to be in debt and how much money are they going to make. So that's I'm still very much in favor of what we talked about before the break, which is college has wonderful, quote, side effects in terms of, the critical thinking. You learn you learn about historical context, you make lifelong connections. Those things are wonderful, but we have to figure out how to provide those things at a lower cost.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go to Aaron, who's in Sandy, Utah. Aaron, welcome to The Middle. What do you think about the cost of college education?
I do agree that I think depending on the school that you go to, that the cost can be exorbitant for some families. We've actually made a career change in my own family. My husband went from probably a much more lucrative career in medicine to teaching. And so now he teaches history at a college. So he went back to college and got a PhD in history after getting a podiatric medical degree. And so we still have those medical school debts, but by selling our practice, we paid for his PhD. But certainly we're not at the earning potential we could be. So I wish that there were an easier way for people to make career transitions if they wanted to. But in his teaching, history, the school he teaches at it's a 4-year college, but it's also more focused on, medical assisting, cybersecurity. It's more trade focused. And he's the history teacher. And we're finding that there's a lot of people who benefit, like you were saying, from that critical thinking. There's a lot of, I think there's a growing ignorance of history and of being able to look at information and determine what is true and what is not true, and how to interact with this world of social media.
Yeah, which is so important right now, and it doesn't seem like everybody has that knowledge. Aaron, thank you for that. It brings up an interesting point, Kathleen, which is, what about when people change careers after they get a degree in one thing, and especially if they go to a trade school and then they get a degree in something and then they change careers later in life?
Right. And we have to make it easier for career changers. I mean, that's one of the group. When I go through, I have a chapter in the book where I say, okay, who does need college anymore, at this point, with technology and the sort of short lifespan of skills these days, who should go to college and who shouldn't? Certainly people who want to be doctors, lawyers, nurses, teachers need that license, and those licenses require degrees. But increasingly, we have a lot of careers where, particularly if you're a career switcher, you could, like my own daughter did this, right? You could switch into a career by going to a couple of boot camps or taking getting an industry certification. And she got into digital marketing without going to university as, like a 30-year-old. So, that's something that we're trying to make it easier. And community colleges are, in particular, I think, setting themselves up now because they recognize what's going on. They were losing so many students. Now they're trying to set themselves up to provide this stepladder approach where people can come in and out of learning experiences throughout their working lives.
Well, and I know there are these like 6-week startup institutes even where you can go in and basically do a mini business school and meet everybody in a certain industry and then, learn a few things that you need to know, but basically get your foot in the door and get into a new job. Alyssa is calling from Detroit. Alyssa, what do you think? Is college education worth it?
Yes, I love what you just spoke about because I'm 31 and I'm shifting into a law degree, and I'm currently at a community college just outside of Detroit. So I'm following the path that was just talked about, where it feels necessary to go into some type of debt to get this.
Well, and especially with a law degree, because you've got to have that. You can't practice without it.
Right. And I dropped out of college at 21. I went to Hollywood. I got into producing, and then COVID hit in 2020. I was just around 26, 27 years old. And that's not an industry where you get to climb up a ladder and become more and more of an expert, and it's a safe hold. So that really taught me that I wanted something I could be an expert in and grow from that and have a security in my expertise, which is where I think a degree is really helpful, because what I'm investing in, there is technically or historically a payback to that I can grow in.
And is it costing you a lot of money to go to this community college, Alyssa?
Right now, no. Actually, Michigan created a program called Michigan Reconnect for people like me that have not been in school but started it, and it allows me to have free tuition until I complete my associates, which has been the reason that I went back to school. And now I'm nervous. I'm heading into finalizing my bachelor's, so it's going to cost a bit to do that, but I'm actually choosing schools that cost a lot less. Yeah. And it'll look different on paper, but I'm going to have the paper, and that's been a bit of an ego process for me, but it feels right because I'm just seeing debt everywhere. So that's too scary to get more of.
Alyssa, thank you so much for that call. Kathleen, what do you think when you hear that? And Alyssa also, making the decision to go to a community college, and so many people when they're getting into their junior or senior year in high school, and they're just looking at the big name schools, that's what they want to do, and they're not maybe considering some other places that might be a lot cheaper, less debt, less financial aid, et cetera.
Absolutely. I mean, Alyssa's making a really smart choice because she's going for those like first maybe 2 years or a year and a half, because you can speed it up. She's getting the associate's degree inexpensively, and then the bachelor's degree will be more costly, but she's only going to maybe spend 2 years doing that because she's also got to, save up for law school. So increasingly, colleges, because they're seeing enrollment declines, they are trying to work with people. And states, like she mentioned Michigan, many states are offering these kinds of programs now where they're trying to offer either free tuition for people families making like under 80,000, or other ways to help you game the system. And the information like on the internet and through AI is so much better than it used to be that you can really like work yourself a good deal and not pay as much as the sticker price sounds like it will cost you.
When you say that, the information AI, and we had a caller earlier who said you can get so much information online now, but is it the same as what you would be getting with a college education?
Well, yeah. So that caller was referring to like, can't you learn skills like DIY and learn them on YouTube? And I interviewed some folks in the book who kind of make their path that way. It works for certain fields and it works for certain types of people, right? If you're like a tinkerer and you don't want to sit in a classroom and you're not good at like, you don't want to deal with that, or you have a full-time job, which is many people. These are nice workarounds, nice hacks to a college degree in certain fields, particularly tech, and some forms of like allied healthcare where you're learning. I mean, eventually you have to get a license, but you can learn the first parts of certain roles that are pretty hot by yourself online. It is possible. It's not preferable, but many people. It's like 65% of people have to work their way through school. We need to create college in a way that accommodates them. And we haven't done that in the past. And that's really starting to happen now. I think COVID helped speed that up. And so more people have access.
Jeremy, I got two quick comments about AI and learning on your own. Okay. So William says AI is replacing clerical work, administrative jobs, middle management, and anything you can use chatbots AI to do the work for is going to be cut. Hand skills are the future, at least until they develop robots that can do the job, maybe in a few decades. Then one listener says this is a Frank Zappa quote. Frank Zappa, if you want to get laid, go to college. If you want to learn, go to the library. So do it yourself, says Frank.
There we go. Larissa is calling from Aurora, Illinois. Hi, Larissa. What do you think?
So I am the proud parent of a 2025 high school graduate.
Congrats.
Wonderful.
And thank you. We just finished school. But he graduated with all of the licensing and certifications for restaurant management.
Wow.
And that's part of the high school program. His particular high school has all sorts of trades that, they press most of the high school classes into the first 3 years. And then that senior year is spent learning a trade. They've got, kids doing welding. My freshman student was in carpentry and is doing carpentry 2 next year. It really is pretty impressive, and I understand that not all high schools are equipped to handle that or offer that, but I really think that it's amazing that he is graduated out of high school and has a job in restaurant management.
Wow. So he's not going to college?
He is not going to college.
Wow. Larissa, thank you for that. Kathleen deLaski, that you write about this. Is this dual enrollment? Is that what you would call that?
Yes, it's two. There's two trends in the book I write about that this caller has brought up. But one of them is that now many students are getting part of their AA degree part of their associate's degree while they're in high school. That is a huge trend that hasn't gotten a lot of coverage. And it's because states are making it possible and paying for you to take college classes. So that's one trend. And the second is a kind of a revival of the career and technical education in high school, where some districts and some states are trying now to kind of bake it back into your high school day in a way that for the last 30 years wasn't a thing. We had the college for all movement, and we all had to be, doubling down on math and science and getting ready for the college application process. And now there's kind of a realization, because we're, blurring the lines between these kinds of jobs, that you kind of need both. And that gives you more choice and more optionality. It's not to say that, the restaurant manager may not go ahead and get a degree at some point, but they have, they're job ready coming out of high school, but they also can be on a college track. That's kind of the new thinking in 2025 at high schools.
I'm going to sneak one more call in, and it is going to be Patrick in Raleigh, North Carolina. Patrick, go ahead with your thoughts.
Hi, yes, thanks for having me. One thing I thought that may have been missed this evening were, if we're talking about the costs associated with going to college versus not going to college, one of those costs are, the social costs of not going to college. Whether we like it or not, for better or for worse, there does seem to be a stratification in our society where the college educated do sit on top of that. And until we grapple with that and whether that system makes sense, I think the costs will always be pretty high for folks that want to be, taken seriously by the people on the top of that strata. If they don't go to college, then it may be difficult for them to do so. So I think, we ought to consider those social costs when considering whether college is worth the cost or not.
Did you go to college, Patrick?
I did, and I find myself having implicit bias against, tradesmen who are frankly probably making more than me. But I find myself having implicit bias against them, and all my friends do as well. And it's something that I think our society needs to grapple with if we're going to, make this adjustment towards making college not worth it. Because there are, as of right now, there are social costs of not going to college.
A great point to end on, Patrick. Kathleen deLaski, how do you handle that? How do you deal with what Patrick is talking about there, and just changing the mindset of people if you are going to actually change society and say, some people can feel perfectly good going to a 2-year trade school or not going to college at all, or going to college and not going into a lot of debt or whatever?
Well, this is exactly why in my book and my belief in the organization that I run, we try to push the notion that, college should be able to house all these different pieces, so that the stigma that comes with not going to college, that, why can't some of the trade programs and apprenticeships and industry certifications and the degree be offered under the umbrella of college and have access to the funding structure that is only reserved for people who do university degrees currently? That's the system that has to change. And I think then the stigma falls away with that.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Kathleen deLaski, founder of the Education Design Lab, and your book. The name is not right in front of me. Tell us what your book title is.
Who Needs College Anymore? Who
Needs College Anymore? And also, we've been speaking with former University of California President Janet Napolitano. Kathleen, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Great conversation, great questions.
And don't forget, The Middle is available as a podcast in partnership with iHeart Podcasts on the iHeart app or wherever you listen to podcasts. And coming to your feed in the next few days, an episode of our weekly podcast extra, One Thing Trump Did. And we're going to be looking at what's going on with air traffic control. Eesh,
What?
I don't know if I want to hear that one, but next week we'll be back here talking about the role of Christianity in our politics.
As always, you can call in at 8444-MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. You can also reach out at listentothemiddle.com, where you can also sign up for our free weekly newsletter and support us with a tax-deductible donation.
The Middle is brought to you by Long Nook Media, distributed by Illinois Public Media in Urbana, Illinois, and produced by Harrison Patino, Danny Alexander, Sam Burmistaz, John Barth, Annika Deschler, and Brandon Kondritz. Our technical director is Steve Mork. Thanks to our satellite radio listeners, our podcast audience, and the hundreds of public radio stations that are making it possible for people across the country to listen to the middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson, and I will talk to you next week.